Hey guys, wanted to make you a video talking about First Kings. I've worked all the way up to chapter 16, or chapter 17 rather, finished up chapter 16. And one of the things that I kind of wanted to preface here is that I try not to make you guys a video just for the sake of making a video. There are times when I go through, when I read a chapter or two chapters or whatever, and there's something that maybe speaks just to me, or there's something that maybe I didn't really get a whole lot out of it, and that's kind of what's happened the last couple of times. Is as I've read through these last couple chapters, nothing in particular has really jumped out until I get to the point where I am today, where now I can see, after reading 5, 6, 7 chapters, that there's an overriding theme that I kind of wanted to share with you guys. So one of the things that that I see here is that, once again, God's will is going to be done. The last that we had talked about how Solomon had basically, he had wisdom and he was guiding, and he was walking with the Lord and so on and so forth. But then it talks about how he marries into other cultures and things like this. And this was something that was expressly forbidden, not as a sense of racism and stuff, but this is a symbolic thing that we're told not to do. And again, as we've talked about in the past, the things that we're commanded to do come down to a matter of faith. Obedience is a product of faith. And I say that in the sense that when God tells us not to marry into other cultures, that he does so for our own good, not for his, not for any sort of purposes that that would seek to cause us to discriminate against another nation or color or anything like this, but in the sense that when you have the two that become one, the husband and the wife, and they become one, that poses a major problem and a serious heartache and stress, and just an undermining of the spirit when the two become one in that sense, but yet they're still walking in two divergent paths. Maybe you have Solomon, who is walking with the Lord, but you have his wife who is not, and that now creates a conflict between the two greatest loves in that particular individual's life, namely that of his wife and that of his God. And that is an extremely painful, terrible place to be, is to be in that place of having to choose between the one that you love most on this earth and the one that you love most in your spirit. And I don't wish that on anybody, but ultimately what ends up happening here is he disobeys and he marries into another culture, and then he gets drawn away into their gods, and he ends up drifting away from God. And as a result of this, the nation of Israel is split into two. You have Israel and you have Judah, and the two basically go through this whole line of just evil leaders as a result of the actions that Solomon took here. And we can see that sin has consequences beyond that which just affect us directly. And we've talked about this before in the past in other studies, but ultimately, because of Solomon's disobedience, it leads to this split. Because of this split, it leads to ungodly leaders coming into place, leaders like Jeroboam and Rehoboam. Jeroboam, who rules Israel, and Rehoboam, who rules Judah, from that line of Solomon. And basically both these guys are evil guys. They're battling against each other, and there's all sorts of things that's going on here. As one leader basically dies off and his son takes over, and then it says that his son is worse than that. And it's just a constant recurring theme as you work from, say, 1 Kings, maybe chapter 10, all the way up to 16. You see that each leader gets progressively worse and worse and worse, with the exception of a guy named Asa, who served basically he ruled Judah under that line of Solomon. And it says that he was a good leader, and one of the things that he did was it says that basically when he came to power, that at that particular time, the Sodomites had taken over, not taken over, but they had multiplied throughout the land, and that culture and things like that, and this was just infecting that closeness with God, that relationship with God amongst the people. And the first thing that Asa did was, it says that he put them away. Now, it doesn't really specify whether or not he killed them, whether he banished them, whether he sent them away. I don't really know, and it doesn't really matter. The fact of the matter is that the people had rebelled against God, and that Asa had seen this, and he dealt with it. As being the ruler of Judah, he saw the problem and he dealt with it. One of the other things that it says that he did was that he saw that his mother had been involved in creating these groves, which were something that was part of Baal worship and things like this, and that he put his mother away as well. Once again, put in that situation of having to choose between maybe the one that you love most and your God, and Asa here chose his God, and as a result of that, we see that for a period of time, Judah comes back in line with God, and as a result, they're given a certain margin of peace until Asa dies off, and then another guy comes in, and he's not a good guy. And we can just see this constant recurring theme. And the two things in particular that I want to take from this is that when we see sin within our own house, it's got to be dealt with. We can't just leave it. We can't ignore it. And the other thing is that, like we've talked about before in the past, that obedience is a product of faith. Faith in God, in what He has commanded us to do, produces obedience. Even if we don't have understanding, He tells us, don't eat pork, whatever. And we have a tendency to look at that rebelliously and think that God is trying to deny us something. And as we've talked about in the case of Adam and Eve, it's not really that God is trying to deny us, but that God has understanding beyond that which we have, obviously, because He's God. And He's trying to head us off at the pass and let us know that, hey, that's not what you want. You are not going to want what's at the end of that. And one of the things that we found is that there is actual health reasons why we weren't to eat pork. There were symbolic reasons as well, and we see that later on in the New Testament, that I believe that those were lifted, but others may not. But the fact of the matter is it comes down to an issue of faith. Do we believe that God is keeping us away from things for our own good, or do we believe that God is trying to keep us away from things because He's some megalomaniac who just wants to deny his kids something? And that is ultimately the crux of the argument here, as far as obedience goes. So I wanted to share that with you guys today. Tomorrow, I'm going to start reading chapter 17, and it's going to go into Ahab and Jezebel, and those are two characters that are actually talked about in the book of Revelation. So there's some significance and some tie-in there that'll be important later on as we start reading through the New Testament. But I wanted to give you guys a little bit of an update, and hopefully encourage you that keep God first. So, all right, God bless.